A few years ago, it happened to be on November 1st, when one of the preachers on the internet started a discussion group. He wrote, "I can even choose not to send Christmas cards. I can choose not to sing Christmas carols during Advent." Then he decided, "Any bets on when we get into the annual discussion on this list?" Well, the discussion started. The very moment he posted it, and it continued on for 57 messages with the subject line changing from Advent Introit to Advent Christmas Rant, to finally the title says, "Rant Continued." Some preachers ranted eloquently against the commercialization of Christmas, explaining that the church had sold out to the secular culture. Others gave equally passionate defenses of Christmas carols during Advent from their point of view. You see, a properly liturgical church, Christmas carols are not sung until Christmas Eve. Advent songs are not the same as Christmas carols. One is supposed to sing, "Come thou long expected Jesus," or "Lo, how a rose ere blooming," but one is certainly not to sing "Silent Night" or "Away in a Manger" until the liturgical calendar says you can do so. Then you're allowed to sing traditional Christmas carols for 2 Sundays after Christmas. But it seems that the liturgical churches like that have mostly lost their battle because Christmas is celebrated earlier and earlier. Many years ago, I attended a church that refused to sing Christmas songs until Christmas Eve. And I found it was very difficult to get in the Christmas spirit. I see no harm in singing Christmas carols whenever you want, but there's a certain value in the emphasis upon preparation found in the liturgical churches. That is what Advent is all about. One church I'm aware of actually stumbled itself into a proper Advent. That's because they simply couldn't find all the pieces to the manger scene. So the first Sunday there was only the manger. The next Sunday, shepherds, and so forth and so on. Usually, here at Our Redeemer, I follow the prescribed lectionary for the most part, except I told Jan I'm calling an audible today in the Old Testament. We follow those readings, especially looking forward to this time of year, except for the first Sunday in Advent, which seems many times to focus on apocalyptic times. And that's a dark theme. It's hard to turn that into a Christmas message. If you heard about that, the first text talked about, God, where was, why do you have such low regard for me, so forth and so on. So our passage today from Isaiah has something of that flavor. Isaiah is no longer a young man. He's an old man who has returned with his people from exile. They returned to a city in ruin, a temple in ruin, and their lives in ruin. These were dark days for the people of Israel, and it had been a long time since anyone had seen God do mighty works. So Isaiah pours out this lament, pleading for God to tear the heavens once again. He is longing for God to act. Standing in the rubble of the lost temple amid the ruins of the lost faith, he cries out to God to be visible instead of invisible. In verse 7, he proclaims, "For you have hidden your face from us." Earlier in verse 5, he tries to blame the people's sins on God. "Behold, you were angry and we sinned." Blaming God. You were angry and we sinned. And the whole thing about visible and invisible God, that is a true thing. We could do a Bible discussion group on that sometime. But the bleak passage from Isaiah is actually a great one for beginning the Advent season. Because it is so filled with an eagerness, a yearning for God to act. It was a yearning that would not really be answered until the birth of Christ centuries later. But that is a good model for us as we prepare for Christmas ourselves. We need to reflect on the deep need that we have for Christ. It is a mistake to gloss over the very reason for Jesus' coming. He came into the world because the world was in sin. The coming of Christ filled a deep need to the people, and it still does. Can you identify with these words of Isaiah about the hiddenness of God? Where's God in this? Where's God in that? Pardon me, I got a drink. I get dry mouth real bad. Have you ever stood amid the ruins of your faith and prayed, but felt like you were only talking to yourself? Nobody's listening. Nobody's home. Have you ever stood beside the bed of one in pain and prayed for God's help, but felt that God was far away? Have you ever felt that God has been hidden for too long? Have you ever wanted God to do something like tear the heavens and come on down here? All of us have felt that way at one time or another. Perhaps those are the people who are struggling the most to get ready for Christmas. How can you properly enjoy Christmas when you feel that God is absent? How can you experience the presence of God when you know now is all you know now is the hiddenness of God? Many famous people have experienced the hiddenness of God. The famous theologian Henry Nouwen, which I do want to pull something out real quick. Our Advent devotions that we'll be doing on our daily devotion, and the Advent lighting of the candle, what we do there. Our devotional is written by Henry Nouwen. Great author. Fantastic author. Required reading at seminary. Nouwen expresses the fact of God's absence like this. The minister is not called to cheer people up, but modestly to remind them that in the midst of pains and tribulations, the first signs of new life can be found and a joy can be experienced, which is hidden in the midst of sadness. Famous writer Emily Dickinson had a profound faith, and she wrote this: I know that he exists somewhere in the silence. He has hid his rare life from our gross eyes. In recent years, I've had opportunity to do some looking at Isaiah and Deuteronomy and Job. Job. Now there's a contrast. In Deuteronomy, Moses was recounting the amazing miraculous actions of God in dealing with the people of Israel. He wrote, God shook the mountains when he spoke. God marched them through the Red Sea, then destroyed the pursuing Egyptian armies. God gave them fire by night, cloud by day, and God provided miraculous water and bread. Deuteronomy chapter 4 says, For what great nation is there that has a God so near to them as Yahweh, our God, is whenever we call on him? Did a people ever hear the voice of God speaking out in the midst of the fire, as you have heard and lived? Or has God tried to go and take a nation for himself from the midst of another nation by trials? He says, Yahweh, your God, brought you out of Egypt. Those indeed, they were times when God tore the heavens and came down. Moses filled the fear of the people. Moses filled with fear that the people would not obey them in spite of what God had done. God is absent sometimes. Sometimes we feel like we have nobody listening. I love the verse in Colossians chapter 15 that says, He is the image of the invisible God. I love that. Jesus put a shape to the absence. Jesus offers a face to the hidden God. When we stop and look, we can see the light of God in him. When we stop and listen, we can hear the voice of God in him. When we stop and consider, we can find the hidden God in Christ Jesus. God may seem hidden in your life. If that's how you feel, this season is for you especially. As you are able to look forward to the coming of this little baby, this bundle of joy. That's what Advent is about. I love Christmas carols. I don't mind singing Christmas carols during Advent once in a while, because Christmas carols are sung so rarely, but so too are Advent. We celebrate the fact that we are a liturgical church at the early service. We celebrate that fact. And so I want you guys this Advent season not to rush to Christmas, but to take each day in Advent as a day of expectation, thinking about what is to come. I remember Renee wouldn't tell me what my birthday present was. She kept saying, you gotta wait till your birthday. Gotta wait till your birthday. I was excited. That's what we need to do, is we need to wait for Jesus on Christmas Eve, and then all gather together joyfully to wish him a happy birthday. May God give us this vision